All right, guys, welcome to the Omega Sports Show. I am Dell with Omega Sports, and we are live on Facebook and YouTube. It's going to be a great show. I have one of my favorite guests that I've been waiting to get on the show for a while now. You guys have, if you've been checking your email and you've been on social with us, and you've certainly been on your podcasting platform, then you know that Matt Clancy, our host with the most of the Omega Sports Endurance Podcast, has just started releasing some amazing interviews, and we're super happy to have him on the show today. So we're going to learn more about endurance sports. We're going to learn more about Matt and his background, and we're going to do a look back at some of his early podcast interviews, which I'm telling you, you got to listen to. They're amazing. So we'll have him on the show today. Super excited. If you guys are interested in any kind of endurance sports information, we're going to answer some questions towards the end of the show. Or if you're just an athlete or you just like to move more, you can't go wrong listening to our host, Matt Clancy, with the with the Omega Sports Endurance Podcast. All right, so before I get Matt on the show, I do want to give you guys a quick, in case you missed it, that's a new segment that we started on the show. I want to know that you don't miss and you stay informed with all the great content that we're producing. We had Chris Kepko, who is our new Pickleball Omega Sports ambassador, on the show last week. I know you guys loved the show. I saw a lot of great feedback for it. But in case you missed it, I want to give Chris, our Pickleball ambassador and our rep for Paddle Tech, which is a great brand that we brought into Omega Sports, talk a little bit about what the sport of pickleball is. And then we're going to ask Matt, are you a pickleballer?
You play pickleball on the court the same dimensions as a badminton court.
Yep. That's what I say. I always say it's like ping pong, but like real life ping pong.
Yeah. You're standing on top of imagine you're standing on top of the table.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people assume that this is a natural transition if you play tennis, which is, maybe true, maybe not, but it also is not a prerequisite. You don't have to be a great tennis player to be able to play pickleball.
Absolutely not. We see a lot of people, especially as they get older, transitioning from tennis into pickleball because it's not as hard on the body. The hand-eye coordination is very similar, but almost any sporting we have, whether it be base ping pong, is going to relate to, pickleball. Just tennis players is a little transition just because of their background.
Right. Although I will tell you, not that I'm a great tennis player, it was a little, you do have to have a little bit more finesse because you can't really power that ball across because your opponents will get tired of chasing the ball in the court, third court down the way there.
And the paddle's a little bit shorter. See, a lot of tennis players missing the ball because they're wondering where the rest of their racket is.
Yeah, that took a few games to get that straight. Yeah. All right, so Chris, so what got you into pickleball? How did that even happen? I mean, again, not to put you on this, make any assumptions, but Navy Special Ops, athlete, a lifelong athlete. How in the world did you end up at pickleball?
So I avid golf for my whole life, ever since I was 12. And then back in the past couple of years, I played 6-7 times a week. I just absolutely was in love with golf. I always have been. The club that I was a member at built 3 or 6 pickleball courts. So they got done, and that afternoon I went out there and hit the ball around and absolutely just got addicted. And I don't know, everybody asks me why. And I think it's, just being the age that I am and having a competitive sport and something new. I was a pretty good golfer, and going to a new sport that I was brand new in, it actually just, absolutely engulfed me, and I just, from that day on, I think I've played golf 10 times since, and that's almost 2 years ago. That's how much I fell in love with it. And then to the point where I was playing 2 to 3 times a week, just anywhere I could find a game, anywhere I could go, just going out there playing with anybody, just absolutely loved it. And I think it was a competition. Being at my age and just how much I love sports, it was a natural transition to, into pickleball. 10 times since, and that's almost 2 years ago. That's how much I fell in love with it. And then to the point where I was playing 2 to 3 times a week, just anywhere I could find a game, anywhere I could go, just going out there playing with anybody, just absolutely loved it. And I think it was a competition. Being at my age and just how much I love sports, it was a natural transition to, into pickleball.
All right, well, that was our Omega Sports Pickleball ambassador. Just a little clip of a fun show that we did last week, talking about the sport of pickleball. We got to learn about Chris and how he went from a special ops armed forces soldier to a pickleball expert, coach, ambassador. representative of a world-class brand like Paddle Tech. It's a fantastic show. I want to encourage you guys to check it out. And of course, today's guest, Matt Clancy of E3 Endurance and our host for the Omega Sports Endurance podcast, is going to be on the show. And I may pick his brain a little bit about pickleball. I know he used to play tennis, so that'd be a good conversation to start with. But before I bring him on, I do want to give you guys an opportunity to hear one of his most popular podcasts. It actually was one of the first interviews that he was able to do on his new podcast with Omega Sports. And to be honest, it was his first interview and he knocked it out of the park. And one of the things I know that Matt will share with you guys is the love of just being able to celebrate all these wonderful athletes that he gets to work with, gets to run, side by side with, and, just that friendship that's out there in the North Carolina community. So this is a interview with David Daggett, and just listen to how prolific David Daggett is when he's talking to Matt.
To some degree, is that still a motivating factor? Times, places? Because you talked about the consistency and the frequency. And
yeah, it is. And, you're going to think I'm speaking a little bipolar or paradoxical here, is I truly, truly believe that swimming, biking, and running has provided me with a great lifestyle, and racing is just the dessert or the treat on top of that. And that's not the goal. The flip side is I'm still an athlete. And so, when I toe the line, I'm going to go, and I'm going to go as hard as I can on that day. Yes, I'm still competing. And yes, if you're next to me and we're 50 yards from the finish line, it's a full-on sprint. I don't care how much younger than me you are. We're going for it.
All right. Well, Matt, welcome to this is your official welcome to the Omega Sports Show live on Facebook and YouTube. So we took you from off-camera podcasting. Now we put you on camera loud and proud.
Hey, Del. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I want to get into a lot of things with you, but I do want to just celebrate the fact that you got David Daggett on your first interview on your podcast. I mean, that's not he's a celebrated local citizen here in the Triad. And not only that, in the triathlon universe, he's very celebrated. So tell us a little bit of background on your relationship with David.
Oh, sure. Yeah. David's he's a legend. We raced years ago together, especially at the Ironman level. I've gotten to know him personally throughout our kids series that we host here in Greensboro, and as well as the races that he puts on in Winston. And his kids would come over when they were 7, 8 years old and do our races. And we would go over with our kids over to Winston and do his races and his adult sprint. And I would see him at all sorts of events, and we just became really close friends. And we have the same passion for swimming, biking, and running, and just challenging ourselves and overcoming those obstacles that Ironman provides you.
Yeah. And I think, I don't want to put you in a certain level, but you've done how many Ironmans, and David has done how many Ironmans?
Oh, well, he's done a lot more than I have. I forget what number he's on, but I think I'm in that 14 range for Ironmans. I've done maybe 30 to 40 half Ironmans. I'm in the 200 to 300 triathlon category, but I've been doing this I think my first triathlon was 1996. I've been racing marathons since 1995, running since 93, or competing as a runner since 93. So I don't even want to do the math on that, Del.
Yeah, well, for folks that either David or Matt, or you're just looking for a great podcast on real athletes talking and that camaraderie, that podcast I love because there was such a camaraderie in the conversation that you had. Obviously, you had some good questions for him, but really what I loved is I remember him saying, I believe the words were, I remember, Matt, when you were just a little whippersnapper and coming through, and and you both were talking about now you both got a little gray hair. One has more than the other. And you guys really have I know we're talking about endurance sports, but you guys have really endured quite, decades behind you of being that athlete at the highest level to be able to compete. And then of course you're doing it for others as well. I want to let people know that they can easily check out the podcast all our podcasts, but certainly the one with David at podcast.omegasports.com.
Yeah, one of the fascinating things about David and why I think we got on so well was we've been around the game for, at least the Ironman game, for a long time, him pretty much the entire span of Ironman, and just to see how it's changed, but yet we haven't much at all. We've still, like you said, endured. We've gotten through these 30 years or 3 or 4 decades of Ironman, and how we're still in the game and what's driving us to continue to go out and participate in Ironmans or compete in Ironmans, where you see a lot of people use Ironman as a bucket list, where they go and do an Ironman and then, they sell their bike and they get out of the sport because they have accomplished that goal. And why we do it year after year and event after event is, I was curious to see why he was doing it, because I wanted to see if it was on par or similar to why or what the reasons I have.
I think that was a great question that you asked him. And again, another reason to check out that interview, because you're right. A lot of people, these athletes that want to push themselves, they have that bucket list item. They've got if only I could do this, I'll feel like I'm accomplished. And then you're right. They go backwards and they just go back to their regular routine. And David and you, for quite some time, continue to keep pushing yourselves and keep, signing up for those big moments. And especially with him, I mean, I don't think he's slowing down. I didn't get any indication from your interview that he's planning on slowing down.
No, he doesn't slow down. That's what's so fascinating. That's what I was curious about. It's like, how are you still this good at this age and you've been doing it for this long? Experience, I guess, goes a long way.
Yeah, I'm going to get him out of the doghouse he put himself in, because I know he talked about like the frustration sometimes with family, and maybe that was kind of a motivating factor. I'll say we want to thank his family for the support system. They allowed him to be able to be this fantastic athlete.
Oh, yeah, that's what people don't realize. Ironman is a big commitment. It's a big sacrifice. And the people that allow you to make those commitments and to sacrifice their time with you is a big part of the sport. Not many people can do Ironman. Not many dads or family people or people who have, jobs that require 80 hours a week. They need the support of everyone around them to sacrifice all the time that they spend swimming, biking, and running. So, and that's what, he was talking about in that clip was, going out to race is really just a celebration. It's the icing on the cake. I don't want to say that's where all the fun is, because we enjoy the process and the training for these events, but it's just out there to go celebrate. Everybody has done all the work. You've got all the people cheering for you. It's really celebration for that sacrifice and for everyone supporting you. And it's, and maybe that's one of the reasons why we continue to do it. It's such a unique experience, and one that I hope anyone who achieves it will get that out of it and continue to do it, even though it is quite a sacrifice of time. But there are many other races that don't require so much training that could easily keep people in the game. So,
yeah, well, I will say it does something for your spirit too, because obviously he's a great humanitarian. I know he's celebrated in our community for the good charitable work that he does. He's always involved in, important causes in the area. So there may be something to like pushing yourself and having that support system, and then, paying it back afterwards, I think is a good testament. And again, a great interview that you were able to knock out really early on, when I think we were kind of considering this still being a testing phase. And then you dropped this amazing interview and it just soared. And we're super happy to, of course, have you. So Matt, I want to kind of go back a little bit, because we've talked about David, but now I want to really talk about you. And I want to start with just something very basic. Like we call it the Endurance Podcast, right? The Omega Sports Endurance Podcast. Of course, your company, E3 Endurance. I want to just start for people who are just, learning this stuff. Tell me, what does endurance sports mean? What does that mean to you? And how did you get into it? And is it really that much different than just sports?
Well, yeah, that's a great question, Del. I look at endurance sports is by true definition, you're having to overcome something, either the physical aspect, the mental aspect, the emotional aspect. And what we find, and not every endurance sport has to be an Ironman or take 12 hours, but what I think about endurance sports is when you cross that finish line, you will have overcome some sort of challenge, either because of the race or something within the race, or what you had to do to even prepare or get to the start line. So what are you enduring? What are you having to overcome? That's how I see endurance sports. And obviously, when you have just the definition of enduring, usually it's the duration or the length of an event, and the muscle, the muscle fatigue that you have to endure, the cardiovascular or the cardiorespiratory system, the heart and lungs, and the muscles, how much they're taxed to compete in a sport. And I know all sports use those energy systems and require those, and usually they take them to their exhaustion. But to be able to pace yourself for that distance and to overcome those challenges are what I believe is endurance sports. And when I got into it, coming from a team sport background or in high school and not being a collegiate athlete, I had to find something to challenge myself or to find a way to compete when you can't compete against other people. I found endurance sports or running and marathon running to be a highly competitive sport personally and internally, to where I had to compete with my inner self that didn't want to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Who's going to win? I'm going to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to go run to the Coliseum and do laps around the track and be back before any of my college roommates are awake. And who's going to win that day or win that workout? And so doing difficult things became a sport to me.
I love that. Doing difficult things. Yeah, I love that. And of course, I kind of define it as when you have already exhausted yourself beyond belief, they make you do something else, right? So after you've been cycling for so long, they're going to make you swim. If you're going to, or whatever, like it for someone like me may seem, kind of odd and strange that humans would put themselves through that. But when I get to hear your podcast or hear your interviews or hear you talk about your athletes that you coach, I mean, you really are pushing that mental strength. You're teaching people how to use their bodies in ways and understanding their body in a way that how much to push it, when not to push it, how to recover. I mean, it really fits nicely. And that's why, of course, we wanted to have you a part of our universe. You've been a customer with us for a while, and we've done things in the past, but to really have your voice and your expertise being shared, that's important to us because, of course, run more, move more, play more. We are all about that. But now it's almost like, we want to take it up a notch to folks that are really wanting to train their body, be so in sync with their body to be able to accomplish sometimes what may seem impossible.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And that's as I got into the sport as an athlete, I was constantly looking at how could I improve my ability to go past what I perceived was my limitation or the end of what I could do physically or mentally. So, with all these different events, they have all these different challenges. So, with certain training modes and different ways to practice or hone your skills, I was constantly searching to find, or even maybe just to move that limit. Because sometimes you find that limit a little too early in your performance or your endurance or your participation in these events. And you're going to have to get to the finish line somehow. So I've just been fascinated with the training for these sports and learning as a coach, moving from the athlete side to the coaching side. How does one understand everything about swimming or biking or running, and how do you bring it all together? And what about the strength component? And what about the internal component? How do you build a better system inside of you so that you can elevate yourself to a higher level to achieve certain performance goals or time goals? So it's just been it's been a journey over these last 25, 30 years to figure all this stuff out. And, I think that's why I constantly participate too, is because every time you line up to the start line or you cross the finish line, I learned something. May have been the hard way, or maybe I figured something out. And I do that a lot in training when I'm working with athletes, teaching them how to swim. While I'm actually in the pool myself, I'm constantly thinking about what I said to athlete X or or Joe over here, and does that really click? And I try to put myself in their position, or in their actual position in the water, to see if doing this might help them, or kicking a little more might help them. So I'm constantly processing what it is to be an athlete, as well as how to take that to help other people get better.
Yeah, and I heard you say early on that you participated in sports, but when you got to a certain level, you weren't doing necessarily team sports, and you still wanted to keep yourself competitive, keep an edge, train your body to be able to push yourself and stay competitive. But it was really competitive with yourself. And it sounded like you didn't have really a coach at that point. So you were kind of honing your own coaching skills early on. And I'm sure you've got help along the way. But now you get to do that for others. I love hearing that. I love the fact that you as an athlete have been able to, perfect, if you want to say perfect, or figure out techniques and different strategies for yourself. And then you're able to then, you got so curious about it that you really wanted to learn all of it. And then you've turned that body of knowledge into success for others, which of course then has led you to be a sought after coach in the area. And of course, with your business, we've got on the screen right now your Instagram handle at E3 Endurance, which of course we encourage people to follow. But let's talk about that. Like, talk about the journey of like athlete to coach to entrepreneur.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I look at it in this regard, as an athlete, I was trying to find a purpose, whether it, and David and I talked about this to some length. It provided a certain lifestyle. I got into endurance sports because I like the challenge, and I like pushing myself and trying to get a better understanding of who I am as a person, and what my capabilities are. And every time you move that line, or you overcome some obstacles or challenges, you cross every finish line, there was a level of confidence that just kept building and brewing, that I could tap into in other areas of my life. And, so when I was competing in triathlons, I was okay. I was pretty good. I moved out to Southern California, where that was the mecca of triathlon back in the 90s. So I was like, I was going to go out to California and be a triathlete. That's just what I was going to be. So I did it, and went out there and competed against the best in the world. And I was just okay. And that was great. And I got better and better and better. Well, I moved back home, where I was born, in Washington, D.C. And I started coaching. My roommate, best man at my wedding, was coaching a little league football team. And my other buddies that we all played high school football together, they were coaching it as well. So it's like, hey, do you want to come coach with us? It's just for fun after school for these kids. And I was working in a triathlon shop at the time. So just kind of figuring out how to help people, because now I had all this experience. I'm an Ironman athlete. I've come back to DC to work in the industry as a bike fitter, mechanic, just helping people get involved or get started into the sport. But all the while, I'm coaching this little league football team. These kids are probably 10 or 12 years old. And I loved every minute of it. Just taking these young kids, these young boys, and trying to help them be better. And our team had a lot of success. And one of my specific job on the team, I was an offensive coordinator, and I could go deep into how I got that position on a little league football team. I used to draw up plays when I was in elementary school. I just used to love drawing plays of how we're going to score a touchdown, trying to figure out how to get this X running back to the end zone. And I just did that as a hobby. And then I become this offensive coordinator, quote unquote, for a little league football team, as well as a quarterback coach. And I had this really amazing kid that was smart, confident, quiet, and was a great leader. And so I spent a lot of individual time with him, talking about not only throwing the football and how to make this play happen, but also how to carry these other guys and how to lead these other 11-year-olds who are, they're scatterbrained and they're just running around having fun. How do you show them or get them all on your page so you can lead this team? And I spent 2 years doing that. And while I was doing that, I realized that have a love for the mind of an athlete, and I'm really curious about how to get. And one of the aspects I think with the quarterback coaching was, all right, so we got to be a leader. We got to use a lot of psychology. We got to be mentally strong. And then I'm sitting here over here training for Ironmans. I'm helping other people get into the sport. And I'm like, there's a connection here. You got sports psychology. You've got the endurance sports that requires a lot of mental strength. And then it just hit me. I was like, it's time to go back to school. I'm going to go back to grad school, and I'm going to go get my master's degree in sports psychology. And that's where it led me down here to North Carolina, and one of the best schools in the country for sports psychology, UNC Greensboro at the time. And I got into the program, and once I was in the program and had been coaching for a couple of years with athletes here in North Carolina, as well as becoming the elite athlete that I came to be at that time, I realized through schooling and the performances that I had gained, over those 3 to 4 years, I had become an elite triathlete and got my pro license, that I wanted to figure out, to give back what I had. I wanted to start my own coaching company that I'd been working with a couple different other coaches here in North Carolina through my grad schooling. And I felt like with the sports psychology component, I had something different to offer that wasn't being offered in any of the triathlon coaches that I'd known previously in many of the regions in this country. So I decided to go off and bring my own flair to helping Ironman athletes, not just in the physical aspect, because I'd been doing that for a while, and I feel like I'm pretty good at that. And coming from a non-coach background and having to figure so many things out myself, I'd gone through many pitfalls, but I spent so much time in Southern Cal and in DC kind of figuring all this stuff out on my own and finding a technique that obviously worked for me, because it took me to a level that I never thought I could achieve. And then the sports psychology component, I thought, man, you take those two, let's figure this out and let's help a lot of other people. And just my love for seeing other people succeed, just like the Little League football team and the countless athletes I've helped over the years. That's just really where my passion's at.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I've got Cleo in the comments here saying love E3, showing you little Greensboro love, little UNCG love, little shout out there. Obviously, your fellow co-host or one of our hosts for our podcast, Cleo Fawcett, our head of apparel, who you know very well in the Greensboro market. She was our market leader for quite some time. Worked with several of your athletes, getting them geared up. Certainly, there was a great connection there. So we appreciate Cleo watching the show and giving you some love there. But what I love what you said is just that fascination with the athlete's mind. Like, I think that is super powerful. And what I was hoping that we would talk about is that, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, there are certainly people who fall into maybe a hobby that then turns into a passion, that turns into entrepreneurship and a career. And then there are folks like yourself that they want to hone their skills to such a degree that they're going to go get degrees. They're going to get the certifications. They're going to go get tested and tried and pushed through to make sure that they have the credentials to be able to really make a good offering. And even though it's all based on your experience, you went and got all the extra things that you needed so that you could make sure that you were confident in helping others. And then, of course, the reward is the fact that you get to see so many people hit every milestone, see so many people achieve different things that they never thought was possible. I can tell you the reason I got introduced to you is because I heard names thrown around several times, because parents were constantly talking about how you helped their young athlete child.
Oh yeah, and one of the things, and maybe this goes back to the Little League football, but when I finished competing at that professional level, and I did it for 4 years, and once I started the business of coaching after grad school, I always knew I wanted to have a younger or development team. I just, Greensboro is a great area. It's very family based, and the joy of taking like 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds that are athletic and then have like skills. They know how to move their body, and then teach them how to do it better was just, I knew that's where I was going to go in some regard. And I had a lot of affinity for the different junior programs around the country that do a heck of a job. And it was a grassroots kind of movement. Endurance sports and triathlon is definitely a niche sport or niche arena. And growing the junior program here in Greensboro and starting in Winston and Charlotte as well, it took a while. I've been at this. My daughter's 13 years old now, and I've been working with junior triathletes that entire time. It started with just doing clinics at the club, and then it became, let's put on little races. And 13 or 14, I guess 13 years later, we now have a 3-race series that is really successful here in town, and our team is just growing by leaps and bounds. And we're now seeing our juniors that used to race in our series and that were on our junior team that have graduated from our high school team that are now on collegiate teams, NCAA Division I college teams now. So it brings me a lot of joy, not because the program's doing so well and that the kids are doing great. It's that we've built an opportunity for athletes that maybe don't fit the mold of team sports, or maybe they just want to compete within themselves. They now have a platform, and we can provide that to them, and heck, make them pretty good athletes along the way. So it's really a joy to be able to teach younger kids to get into a sport that they can really compete in until they're 90 years old. The sports when I was playing, where I was growing up, they ended in high school. If you weren't an excellent, big, fast, super athlete, there wasn't much for us to do after high school. So, keep teaching these guys the skill they can have their entire life is great. It's fascinating.
Well, and I want to also say, we've talked about David Daggett, we've talked about you, we've talked about youth. I do want to make a big shout out, because Cleo, obviously, she'll love hearing this. Let's talk about women athletes, right? Like female athletes. They're also doing triathlons, and they're out there pushing it every single day. And I know you work with a lot of fantastic female athletes, both young and adult. And I do want to do a quick shout out. Cleo did do an interview with Kristen Carlock, our co-owner, who she shared with us her triathlon race that she trained for and ran. And I believe she swam to Alcatraz. You have to listen to the podcast. Like, Kristen's a beast. And that's probably the only time I can ever use those two words in one sentence. But Cleo got that story out. And it was really cool for us at Omega to hear that our co-owner, our head of human resources, is this, mom of 2 great children, a fantastic professional, a wife, but she took it upon herself to train, put in the hours to be able to swim to Alcatraz and do all the other things that a triathlete does. It's a fantastic interview. I want to also just quickly play a little snippet. You just recently had Sammy Winter on your show. That's actually your most recent podcast drop. We're going to be cool and call it a podcast drop. This week we dropped the interview with Sammy Winter, and I just think it's a perfect story of this very, successful female athlete that continues to keep just not only pushing the sport further, but pushing herself further. Let's take a quick listen to that.
It has also provided me with some amazing adventures. I use it as a way to travel, experience the world, and experience, our country, Europe, other countries, and just have so many great adventures. And I think that has really kept me going. And the third thing that I think is so important is because our sport is really swim, bike, run, eat, right? It's not really swim, bike, run, change clothes, eat. It's swim, bike, run, eat. There's always something that you can challenge yourself with. If you happen to be injured and can't run, well, you can go improve your swim. If you have a shoulder that's a little bit tweaky, then you can always go do more strength work. There's always something that you can do, and there's always a way that you can challenge yourself. And growing and learning and meeting people and adventures, to me is what makes this such an amazing sport.
So again, that was our most recent Omega Sports Endurance podcast drop with Matt Clancy. You got a chance to interview Sammy Winter. Again, I just want to do the shout out for all the ladies out there. Like, we are not talking triathlete, just singular. We're talking about everyone that is willing to push themselves. And obviously Sammy is one that I know you were very excited to have on the show. I will tell you that our producer was so blown away because she loves hearing the story and the passion behind female athletes. How cool was it to have Sammy on your show?
Oh, it was an honor. It really was a pleasure. It's one thing to say you go into an Ironman and you have all these sacrifices and it's so hard and challenging. But then when you hear someone who does that and yet does all this other stuff, similar to David, it's like, how do they do it all? And Sammy she doesn't just do it all. I mean, she's a race director for one of the biggest races in North Carolina, one of the biggest races in the country. She's a highly competitive long distance Ironman athlete, extreme triathlete, extreme Ironman athlete, which is even more challenging than just a regular Ironman. And then she coaches all these other people to have and share in the success that she has. And she's a veterinarian. She works. She does so much. I honestly don't know how she does it, but I'm really impressed that she does it with the exuberance, the positivity, and the passion that you heard in that drop right there. That's been Sammy the entire time I've ever known her, every time I've ever seen her. And I would love to have that kind of energy. It's the kind of energy that my 5-year-old has. It's like, how do you harness that? But I think it's you talk about giving it back. That's what fills me with a lot of energy. It's seeing these other people succeed, providing a race environment for kids or for Ironman athletes here in North Carolina and Wilmington, to have them share that experience it's part of the deal in my mind. I mean, if you're going to do all this stuff and you want to do it well, carry someone else across the finish line too.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all in this together. So why not give a little back? And when you approached me months ago to talk about doing the podcast, and I thought we were just having a conversation, but then it just came to me. It's like, well, I've been doing this for a long time. I like to think I know a lot of different aspects about this sport, and I'm in a place where I just want to give it back. I just want to help other people. I've had a lot of personal success in this sport, and not to say I wouldn't want more, but I've got enough, and I think I have enough to give more to other people. So no, Sammy is just one of many. I mean, she's definitely unique, but I'm always impressed with women athletes and women Ironman athletes. I feel like they're much better designed for this sport than men are. But yeah, working with women who sacrifice, it seems like a lot more than us guys do when it comes to their time and giving to the swimming and biking or running. They just know how to push through those barriers that I feel like I struggle with even personally, and they're just tougher than us, I think. And
yeah, I don't think you're going to have a lot of people arguing with you on that point.
Yeah, no, and what's unique about working with men and women, and the sport is the sport. The distances are typically the distances, but we're all different. But one of the things that I see the biggest differences are bike fittings. We're anatomically different, so the bike's got to fit a little differently, and the VO2 max testing. When I say I think women are built for this more than we are, they just have a much better. This is just me and all the VO2 testing I've done, and the metabolic testing I've done. They burn fat, or at least the women that I've tested burn fat much better than men do. Men, we're more sugar burners. And why that is, I don't know. Maybe it's more of intensity and they have different muscle fiber type or whatnot. But even at anaerobic threshold, let's say lactate threshold, about 85 to 90% of your max heart rate, they still do a much better job at or at least the man I tested, at burning fat, where even if a guy is really good, he really does a lot of low aerobic training, a lot of easy low heart rate work, they can improve their fat burning, but not to the point where just a moderately fit Ironman female athlete will burn fat. So, and when you're going the distance and you're keeping your heart rate low, your body fat is such a better energy source than sugars. So if you can tap into that natural energy source that we all have, and you're just going to go a lot further. So we got to figure out.
I just want to let you know, all you have to do is play that little clip for a commercial for women to sign up for triathlons. Is you burn more fat than men. Cleo's in the comments already saying, I need to see that happen faster, please. Let's burn the fat. So that's a great point. But yeah, I just want to, one more thing about Sammy. I love the interview. I think you said it perfectly. She's exuberant and she's contagious on her passion for the sport. And I love that what you've done very well in these podcasts, because this is your life. This is the journey that you chose for yourself. It is a life, and it's filled with adventure. And why not, right? Like, I heard her talking about how the sport and her choice in being in the sport has really just grown her life tremendously. There are other things that she's obviously very passionate about, but the sport itself, endurance sports or being a triathlete, allows her to just have such a bigger life, which is, I think, the beauty of sports itself, right?
Oh, sure. And I think I learned that early on when I got into, and maybe I didn't learn it. Maybe it was a subconscious thing when you're out there competing or running and crossing finish lines. I just figured there's something more, or there was something I was not tapped into, or I was missing in the way I lived my life prior to getting involved in endurance sports, that now was starting to bubble to the surface. And maybe still trying to figure that out. But, I heard David in his drop and Sammy in his drop talk about the lifestyle. And it is a lifestyle, being healthy, eating right, and exercising. We're told that is a really good lifestyle, and using these races to even be a carrot or a catalyst to maintaining that way of life or that lifestyle is as good as an excuse that I can figure out in keeping up with your health and the fun of going to races and going traveling. And we're taking our junior team down to Wilmington. We'll probably see Sammy next weekend for the Wrightsville Beach Sprint, and then we're taking everyone Ironman athlete I know in the triad does her race on Ironman North Carolina 70.3. So I think 2 years ago when they last hosted it, our team had the most athletes out of any team in North Carolina or even the country to come and participate down in there. And it's that lifestyle. It's that love of going to do something difficult, but sharing that challenge with other people, and then going to some fun places or some neat places you've never seen before. And one of the aspects when I was in my 20s, and I hadn't seen much of the world, but when I got into the sport of triathlon, I saw much more of it than I ever had previously. And going to other places and seeing how other people live their life and experiencing different opinions or ideas and geography, I think just enhances your overall worldview and maybe your internal view as well.
Yep. Well, so Matt, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you a sneak preview. There's going to be a call or an email that I'm going to send you that will invite you to participate in something that we're going to continue to grow, which is, we're trying to get kids out of the PlayStations and the Xboxes and the sitting at home all day long, especially during COVID, while kids were at home. We want them out there playing. And you just kind of crystallized why, even at a young age, that adoption of sport and travel and pushing yourselves and camaraderie is so critical to living life both in a better way and a healthier way and a just more fulfilled way. So be on the lookout for that. Now, we've got a few questions that we wanted to answer. We're running out of time, so I'm only going to do a few of these questions, but let's make sure that we honor the folks that we gathered questions for. I'm going to ask you a few questions, Matt, and then what we'll do is we'll also put the rest of the questions in the actual show notes for the show. That sound fair?
Great.
All right. So just so everyone knows, obviously we've talked about endurance sports, E3 endurance. You're working with a lot of triathletes, but you also do specialty, right? Like you also, can work with swimmers, you can work with cyclists, you can kind of break it up and just work in endurance itself. You might need to help me with pickleball, but I'm not sure if that's something that you handle. I'm going to get you on the pickleball court soon. Okay?
I hope so.
And we'll try that. I think I'm going to have all of our hosts actually do some kind of fun pickleball activation. I think would be fun. All right, let's start with the first question. Jess from Greensboro. I don't know how to swim, but I'm interested in participating in a triathlon. What do you recommend she do to get started? Now, that's something that a lot of people are dealing with. Some people did not learn how to swim when they were younger, or maybe they think they know how to swim, but they don't really know how to swim. And this may sound like a bucket list item for Jess, but let's say that she wants to become a triathlon or triathlete. What's a good way to start?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jess. There's a couple different ways to go about it. And you, like many others, want to do a triathlon, and one of the limiting factors is the things most people are trying to overcome is the swim portion. It's usually the shortest portion of the race, which is a good thing, but it's also typically in an open body of water and maybe even the ocean. So learning to breathe is the biggest thing. I see marathon runners that can run a sub 3:30 marathon. You put them in the water, they can't make it across the pool for 25 yards. And it's just a matter of they don't know how to breathe or take in oxygen during the swim. So there are a couple options is to find a beginner group. Sometimes these are masters groups, and masters group doesn't mean that all master swimmers, they're just older swimmers or adult swimmers. Find a swim coach that you can do one session with. And typically when I do swim sessions, the major things we try to get through for the first 60 minutes is breathing, body position, and rotation. Stroke mechanics and things like that are kind of the last things that I work on, because if you don't know how to position yourself in the water or get that oxygen that you need, that doesn't matter what you're doing with your arms or your legs. So look up local master swim team. There's, I think, 4 to 6 of them in Greensboro. Find a swim coach that works with people who don't have a swimming background and can teach you the basics. That'd be a best way to start. And once you get the basics down, you typically have something to work with, where if you go to the Greensboro Aquatic Center or your local swimming pool, you can work on those by yourself and feel confident that what you're doing is going to move you in the right direction to sign up. And there are a lot of beginner triathlons that are pool swim triathlons, to where there are 200 to 300 meter swims. And if you ever get caught in a bit of trouble, you can always stand up or walk, or hold on to the lane rope or the wall. So yeah, definitely have someone get their eyes on you and give you just the simple details, and you'll be signing up for your first try in no time. Thanks, Jess.
I love that. And Jess, that's a great question. I think the highlight that I took away is because I want to literally put this on my board, because almost every expert that we have on the show, whether it is a host or a coach or a physical therapist or a chiropractor or a yoga instructor or a whatever, it always begins with breathing, right? So I think that's a great point, to always make sure that people, especially if you're in the water, to really understand your breath. Because I guess I would have assumed it's more about like this, right? Like learning the technique. And I love that you're like, nope, you got to learn how to breathe first. That's important.
Well, I mean, and to everyone else's point, for endurance sports, oxygen is energy. That's how we get energy to our muscles for them to do what it is we're asking them to do for 1 hour, 12 hours, 20 hours, whatever it is. So if you can't get energy in with all the energy you're putting out, you're going to get in a deficit pretty quick.
I just want to let you know, Kristen Carlock's going to listen to this episode and she's going to text me and say, oxygen is energy. Please make a poster. So I will make a poster. Matt Clancy, oxygen is energy. I got that. All right, can we drop down to Alex's question? Let's go, Alex from New Bern. Alex says, can coaching be done virtually? How does it differ than in person? That may be a easy answer, maybe, but I think in the world that we're in right now, I think people are maybe gravitating towards more virtual. Is that something that's even possible, Matt? Do you do virtual?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, in New Bern, Alex, great question. That's, a lot of athletes that we work with are not all here in Greensboro and Winston to where we can see them on any frequency or a regular basis. And what's happened over the last couple of years is that, we've all had to change the way we do things, and being online has been one of the ways we solve some of those problems. And with virtual coaching, we do a lot of virtual coaching because there's many apps now that allow me to connect with people from anywhere at any time through the internet to provide workouts, and with all the data tracking devices we have now with Garmin's and power meters that can all be uploaded to these apps, so you can see what your athlete's doing. I can see where my athlete's running and what the elevation was, what their max heart rate was, what their average heart rate was, what their fatigue level was, what their stress score is, so you can modify their recovery and what the next workout's going to be based on how hard they did that workout. So virtual training's been around, at least me personally, I've been doing it for a long time. And one of the challenges with virtual training is that you don't get to see the person as much. And I was just on a phone call with a gentleman from Eben today inquiring about how to do this virtually. And one of the things I always ask is that if I don't see the athlete, I'd love them to videotape how they swim, how they bike, how they run, because if you can improve someone's mechanics or the way they move, then they're going to be much more efficient and much more effective and get a lot faster without training at all, or at least training hard. So if you can see the person first, see how they move or what their strengths and weaknesses are, then I can best develop a training plan that's going to help that person versus someone who may be a great swimmer, a great biker and great runner, and they just need like performance-based workouts. I love to set up training schedules and training programs to help the individual that I'm working with get better versus just sending them random workouts. So, having some sort of, and with iPhones, you can I see how you swim in 10 seconds, you can text it to me and I can get an idea of what's going to be a good drill or how to improve your swim. So virtually has gotten a lot better in the last 2 years than it was 20 years ago. So it's not a limiting factor anymore, but knowing who you're working with and having an online relationship with them and being able to see how they move is so important when it comes to working with someone from far away. So thanks, Alex. That's I wouldn't say it's a challenging way to coach someone. It's just a different way to do it. But it's fun. You get to connect with people who are 4 hours away, like in New Bern, or someone who's in Southern Arizona or wherever. It's a great way to connect to people who are not in your backyard.
Yeah, I think what you said is perfect. And Alex, the one thing I'll add to this is that the key word is build an online relationship. I mean, virtually for some people may mean that they just go in and watch a bunch of videos and train themselves. But what I think you're saying is that, coaches that are out there like yourself have now adopted this new virtual world. They have different apps they can track. But it really is that one-on-one relationship that you can have with your coach. That's the key part of it. So the mechanism or the platform isn't as important as long as you're really building that online relationship.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's the only way, not the only way, but I think it's a better way to help people is to understand what their challenges are, what they're trying to overcome, whether it's, their swim stroke, their breathing, their run gait, why they're involved in the sport, why they want to sign up for Ironman or why they want to run a marathon. Because when you write workouts, some of the ways you write workouts are really based on how the athlete intakes information. I mean, if you don't like data and you just You don't like running because running slow and long is boring. Well, let's figure out how to write a running workout based on time to make it more engaging. So, okay, 3 minutes, I'm going to run at this effort. And now 1 minute, I'm going to take easier, go for a walk. And then the next 2 minutes, I'm going to run at this effort. And you just play this, I don't know, this more engaging game to where by the time you are done looking at your watch, it's 45 minutes later, you've gotten some really quality run work in, and it's not boring, and you actually enjoy it and you get better at it.
Yep. Well, Matt, I want to thank you for spending the hour with us. We went a little over. I appreciate you just filling the hour with such great information. I know we've got a few more questions. We'll make sure we get those into the actual show notes when we actually post that in a couple of days. But again, I want to give people just a quick little reminder. It's, if you want to follow Matt and his company on Instagram, you can go to @E3Endurance. So on Instagram, you can follow them. And then if you want to follow them or connect with Matt at his company, you can go to his website, e3endure.com. That's e3endure.com. Matt, I want to thank you again. And of course, we always want to welcome people to listen to all of our podcasts. Of course, the Omega Sports Endurance podcast hosted by Matt Clancy can be found at podcast.omegasports.com. Matt, thanks for I know you had a busy schedule, so I appreciate you taking the hour with us.
Del, my pleasure. I want to thank you for your time and great questions, everyone, and hope everyone out there gets a little something out of this and starts a new adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it's designed to do. We want to inspire people to run more, move more, and play more. And you're giving people great advice, and you're welcoming so many wonderful guests to get people even more encouraged. I
can't wait till Cleo signs up for her first triathlon. That's going to be exciting.
I'm going to sign you up for an iron pickleball. That's what we're going to do.
I'd sign me up. I will be there, Del.
Okay. All right. Well, you have a good one. Enjoy the rest of the week. We will see you soon.
Great. Thank you, Del. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers. All right, guys. Well, that is the Omega Sports Show. I'm Del with Omega Sports. I want to thank you for watching. We will get the show notes up very, very soon, but you can always check out this episode on Facebook, on YouTube. We've got it already loaded for you. As soon as I leave the show, it'll already be there. All right. You guys have a great day. Enjoy.